Hey, well, what is up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 73 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined once again, as I always am, by the one, the only Naya Carlson. How are you doing today?
I'm surviving today, as
Yeah,
you
so
are, I assume.
so what will probably be quickly apparent to anyone watching or listening to this podcast is we're both sick. We're both fighting various stages of sickness. Uh, which is also why we weren't around last week. So we took last week off. I was like
Yeah, you had
I
it
could see the heavenly
bad.
light coming. Like I thought it was the end. Oh man, like I had a bad flu. So we're fighting through some stuff. But you know what? That's what life's all about. And I think we see that when it comes to the Olympics, fighting through injuries, fighting through sickness. So we didn't get a chance. There's a couple things for us to get into this week with the podcast. This thing's happening in culture, some interesting articles and uh, stuff going around the internet that I think are relevant for Christians to apply and think through as far as like, hey, well, how do we approach culture? What is, in fact, a Christian movie? Do we want them? Would we recognize one if we saw one? How do we make them better? So some interesting conversations. But we did want to, like I mentioned, we were off last week, and so we weren't able to touch on like the Olympics. That I kind of ended. I know I was super. I don't know. Were you hooked on the Olympics too? Or are you more of like a summer Olympic person?
I am more of a Summer Olympic person, but I mean, I love the Olympics. As I said before, there's little else that motivates me more than pretending like I'm in the Olympics or training for the Olympics. But I'm more of a Summer Olympics person.
Yes, like I love. Give me the Olympics in any form, and I'm gonna plop on my couch and just watch nothing but Olympics for. But like I grew up in Canada, so like the Winter Olympics for much of my life was like that's the big one because that's where in Canada our
Mhm.
athletes are doing stuff with the sports I played like hockey and skiing and all those sort of things is in the Winter Olympics. And so that we would touch this real quick on just reflect a bit because I think there were some interesting stuff that came out of the Olympics um, that I think is relevant for Christians and I think just culturally it seems like it was not as controversial as some other Olympics. Like I know there's always like, even, like, with the hockey aftermath of the gold medal, like, there's always stuff. Like, that's inevitable, but it just seemed like, for the most part, it was I don't know, it seemed like people were just happy to latch on to, like, the human drama,
Mhm.
and yeah, there were people making noise about and trying to make things political and all that kinda stuff on the fringes, but I don't know, did you find that? Like, it seemed like people were just, I don't know, like, more willing just to be inspired and, like, embrace these athletes as opposed to just, like,
Yeah.
continuing the culture war.
I mean, I think so. I didn't have a way to watch it, so the only thing I really watched was the US Canada highlights and figure skating like finals and stuff like that. So I really didn't pay that much attention this year, unfortunately. Um but from what I've seen, yeah, I think most of the focus has been on what we're about to talk about, on Alysa Liu and her demeanor throughout everything.
Yeah, I think that, and I wrote an article, which probably be out by the time we release this podcast episode or shortly after, on that. I will mention like with the hockey, there was some silly controversy and political stuff that came out of that, which whatever. I think it's one of those things where for me, you realize like social media is not real life, and people were sort of making this big issue online, and then these athletes come back to their home games and they're get these standing ovations, and you kind of realize like no one really cares. Like people want you to think that people really care about these controversies. I don't think people really care. I will say though that I still consider myself Canadian, even though I've lived in America for almost as long. So I kind of cheer for both. But my roots are in Canada, so I'm obviously was cheering for the Canada hockey team to win. That is like our sport. So
Mhm.
it was a shame to not win that gold medal game. But I don't know if you followed it at all. I follow a bit because um, some of the players, well, at least one of the players on the U.S. hockey team is plays for my favorite professional hockey team, the Buffalo Sabres, and he is like a real strong Christian. I've been able to like meet him a couple times when
That's
we've gone
cool.
down there, and we know the chaplain of the team, and so we kind of know like the behind the scenes, like he is really legit. and it's been really interesting, like, since he won the gold medal, actually him and quite a few members of the team, it seemed like there was a real strong Christian contingent among the US, team, and, like, at least 4 or 5 or 6 of them have been, like, very not outspoken in a bad way, but, like, just praising God and using their platform to talk about their faith. So I don't know, it's silver lining perhaps. I'm willing to let the US win the gold if it means that,
Silver
uh,
lining, that's
some of
good.
these yeah, silver lining, yeah, I mean, maybe I got silver on the mind, as a Canadian, or the silver medal. So I did think that was cool. That was one of the big stories. The other one, like you mentioned, like, I feel like, as always happens in the Olympics, like, there's always sort of the breakout stars, like, the moments and the people that really, like, capture the imagination and, and sort of become these, like, legendary figures, and I think and obviously we're coming at this as, you know, being in America, so we're biased that way, but, like, I don't know if anyone broke out more than Alysa Liu, like, the figure skater. Like,
Yeah.
I was hooked on the figure skating. My sister grew up, she was a figure skater. Her coach tried to get me to become a figure skater, and I didn't have the flexibility to do it, but I was not a bad skater. I could have maybe, I'm
Well, you
watching
played
that,
hockey.
could have been me. I played hockey. So I
Hockey's
was
impressive, the work on the
yes.
skate's very impressive.
Oh, see, I'm a decent, ice skater, but I'm not Alyssa Liu impressive when it comes to ice skating, and I'm just fascinated by her, because I feel like in so many ways, like, obviously she won gold, so she was gonna be everywhere, front and center because
Mhm.
she won gold in one of, like, the pinnacle events. I don't know, I feel like sort of who she was and the whole story and, like, her demeanor became as much, like, a part of the story as the fact that she won gold. Like, I think even had she not won gold, there was just something about, like, the joy that she skated and, like, the freedom, um, I don't know how much, because you said you didn't really watch a whole lot of, like, the actual events. Like, figure skating's stressful, like, you're watching these people in their
I
tents and,
know,
like,
yeah.
in your tents, and you saw so many of
It's
them,
like, "Don't fall, don't fall."
like the American men,
Ilya?
yeah, so many of these guys that was clearly were feeling this so tense. And then you see Alyssa Liu get out there and just, like, it's like she's just having the time of her life skating around, like, so free and so smiley
Mhm.
and joyful. Like, it just stands out, sort of the
Yeah.
joy, and I don't know, and that was kinda what I wrestled with a bit, with my article is just I feel like her, like, performance and her whole demeanor and the fact that, like, she was so enthusiastically just embraced by people really, like, across the aisle, like,
Mhm. Everyone loves her.
politically, like, everyone
Yeah.
is like it's like we can sort of we don't agree on much in life, but, like, we can all sort of agree that, like, she's awesome, and watching her skate is
Mhm.
awesome, and the joy that she has, is awesome, and I guess kind of my takeaway from that, was just to sort of I don't know, for me, it's like a reminder of just the power of joy, like, just the power, and I kinda like, in the article, and there's always a danger of, like, I should give a caveat, like, I feel like there and we're all guilty of this, of, like, making these, like, sweeping character assessments based on, like, an interview someone did after they just lost a performance in, like, the biggest moment of their life, and it's like, "Oh, she doesn't seem humble," or "She doesn't," it's like, well, don't judge people by that, like,
Yeah.
like, I think people are more complicated, so I don't necessarily wanna, like, compare, different women or judge them too harshly, positively or negatively, um, but in the article, like, I kinda compared even, like, Amber Glenn, who is the other I think more of the favorite to for the women's skating team, and she did fine. She ended up in 5th. She really only made 1 mistake, or she could have been on the podium too. Like, she skated well, even though
Mhm.
she was clearly, not feeling as loose, but I just was I don't know, I was just fascinated by their different stories, like, because Amber Glenn going in to the Olympics, like, was very much all about sort of she was skating for a cause, like, and I mean several causes, but very much advocating for, like, LGBTQ, the community, and also just representation in figure skating, and wanting to even have more, like, same sex couples in the pairs, and kind of it just seemed like most of her, like, podium things were all about, "I'm skating because I'm sort of this symbol for this, and I wanna advocate for," which is fine. That's people can have causes and all that. But if you kinda contrast that to, like, Alysa Liu, who is very much just like, "I'm skating because I love to skate, and I love my
Mhm.
program, and I love my dress, and I love being here, and I love the people I'm skating." Like, it's purely just like, I'm skating for the joy of what I'm doing. And
Yeah,
I don't know.
external motivation is so much harder to stay, like, consistently there and consistently motivating, but if you have something internally, like, the Holy Spirit that's there, like, giving you fire, then that can last a lifetime
Yeah, and I think it's
too,
just way
and it's very
more
clear.
compelling too. Like, I think,
Mhm.
um, like, regardless of what the cause was, like, even if Amber Glenn was like, "Hey, I'm here to represent the Christian community," like, even if it's a cause that you agree with or whatever, there's just something way more compelling about just seeing someone that's, like, skating, like, that has joy and that is, like, compelled by this, like, deeper sense of having, like,
Yeah,
satisfaction and, like,
and
as
all of
opposed
the
to just.
best Yeah. I mean, all of the best athletes too, that's what you see in them. I think that's different. Sure that they have drive and they have heart and dedication and everything, but like that's why I think Messi is the best soccer player ever, just because he from when he was young, it's so clear how much he just loves playing the game and the joy that he gets from it. And he has never stopped loving it, and so he's just there to play the sport that he that he loves, and then he leaves and goes home and hangs out with his family, he's not caught up in, like, the pressures of having a platform and stuff like that. It just and that joy allows, like, Alyssa and, Messi just to really relax, and that's so important as an athlete. You have to be able to have a loose body and adjust and be flexible and everything during the game, during the performance, and all of that stuff. So I think that's a really pinnacle difference in good athletes versus great athletes as well.
Yeah, and I think it's just, like, even when I get, like, when I mentioned in the article too, is like, I feel like the same thing comes to mind even with, like, outside of athletics, like, think of, like, the Oscars or things or, like, movies or, this movie is important because, you know, it's an important. You gotta go see this because it's representing this, and we're trying to touch on commentary on this, and we need to push back against this or that, or I don't know, like, I tune that out, like, sort of this is important because of all these other things that it represents, as opposed to just, like, feeling like something this is coming from the heart of this filmmaker or from this athlete, and this is sort of bubbling up from within them as opposed to just like, support me in what I do because I'm supporting this thing over here. Like, I feel like with the skaters, you can sort of take that and either agree with it or you can disagree with what they're standing for. But I feel like what stood out with Alyssa and her performance was, like, it was very much like, I want what she has. Like, I want that kinda joy. Like, what would it take for me to be, obviously, I'm never gonna be an Olympic figure skater, but to have sort of that freedom, that assurity, like, self-confidence, and just the joy, and I don't know, maybe to end that is just I kept making the parallels to just Christianity, like, what is our compelling message? Like, not that we don't sort of have a cause or we don't have things we stand for, morals and doctrine and all that kind of stuff. Like, not that we diminish those in the same way that I'm sure Alyssa has her own causes and stuff that she stands for too. But it's like, is that compelling? Like, are we giving people like, you know, support Christianity or, this stuff because we're stand for this and we believe in this? Or are people more compelled and intrigued by just like, we have joy. Like, we have something there's something about our life, the way that's authentic, that comes out, um, that other people don't have, and you see the difference, and that compels people. I think even like I mean, the Bible is filled with verses about joy, but like John 15:11 is such a key one where, like, you know, Jesus gives the whole vine and the branches, like, basically summarizes, like, the essence of the Christian life to his disciples and then concludes, I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. And just very much the sense that like the end of the line, like outflow of Christianity is not the doctrines and the moral, all these other sort of things, the parameters. It's that you have joy. Like that's how you should be able to tell a Christian is that they have joy that just sort of radiates out of them. I don't know. So for me, that was one of my main takeaways from the Olympics is just like I think there's some lessons to be learned. Not that Alyssa, I don't know what her faith is. Like I don't think she's a believer or anything or where her joy comes from. I think it was just a reminder of like how starved people are for joy and like how intriguing that is in ways way more powerfully than just kind of lecturing people from a podium about how important they are or their causes are. But you have any final thoughts on that or just joy and
I
that
agree.
you agree
That's my final thought.
you're pro joy.
I mean, we can even compare it to, like, how we approach making art and literature and stuff like that. Like, we had the guest, writer Sabina Boyer write the article, Why We Need Wake Up Dead Man, and not, God's Not Dead, like in our modern age. And she ended it by saying, We were never called to prove ourselves right, but to be a light and reflection of Christ's love, even in the darkest of places. And I just really love that quote. And I mean, it just backs up what you're what you're already saying. That's I mean, it's a compelling it's a compelling characteristic of Christians that people who don't have experiences with God like that just can't possibly understand until they have those experiences. And I think that that is so cool that that's what God gives us.
Yeah, and just the idea that like light doesn't need to defend itself. Like light is
Yeah.
obvious to anyone that sees it as like, it almost feels like if you need to really defend and dig in and fall back on the causes and why Christianity, really sell why it's needed and all this stuff, then there probably just isn't a whole lot of light coming out. Like I feel
Mhm.
like sort of like Alyssa's joy. Like I just like joy itself and light should be evident to people, and that in itself is a compelling case for the gospel
Mhm.
beyond just trying to like debate people and to get down into the weeds. So I don't know. I love the Olympics. I guess we got 2 more years till the Summer Olympics. It always feels special, even though it's like every 2 years we get Olympics. But it always,
It
I,
does feel special
but it
always,
always feels
yeah.
like, oh, it's finally that time again. So I'm excited. I love the Olympics. I'm sad they
Yeah.
were. I was sad that we both got sick right after the Olympics because it's like if ever there was a time to just, to have
To what? Yeah.
to sit and do nothing but watch TV. But I got sick like the closing ceremony day. And kind of the other thing I wanted to talk about. Another thing that stood out to me that I just thought was, I don't know, I thought was an interesting article that I came across that was kind of getting passed around, at least in the social media circles or people that I follow. And it was an article that was published in National Review called "What is a Conservative Movie?" It was written by a guy. He's an interesting guy. See if I can say his name right. Uh, Giancarlo Sopo.
I
Is
think
that how
it's
you would?
Giancarlo.
Yeah, that's what I meant to
G
say.
Something
Um,
like that, I don't know.
um, he's an interesting guy. I think he's a Catholic, kind of conservative. He's a pretty young guy. I don't know him real well,
Do
but I
you know
like a
him
lot of.
personally?
I don't know him personally yet, but maybe we'll get him on our podcast at some point. But I like following him on social media because I think he has some good insights into um, just into art, into faith, and I don't know. I kind of actually I discovered him back when the Pope was doing that like that gathering of artists and stuff, and he had some good commentary on that, which is sort of how I discovered him. So he wrote an article, and some of it was sort of based on going back to like the halftime show stuff, where it was um, not that he really commented on the halftime show, but like the dual. You have like the secular halftime show, the bad one, the liberal one, the mainstream one, and then we had, like, the turning point, like, the conservative, whatever the all-American, whatever they called that. Like, kind of the conservative one, and kinda his sorta I think the genesis of his article is just that there seems to be this like this sense that there is sort of like a again, he's coming at this from primarily like a political bent, which isn't necessarily how I want to come at it, um, but just this idea that like there is such a thing as like a conservative entertainment, and that like mainstream culture's not making it. Therefore, we need to make our, we need to make it. We need to have our own halftime show. We need to represent these values because they're not, which I
Mhm.
think is like a pretty common belief. Like it seems like you hear that a lot with like Hollywood and stuff. Um, People within either just politically conservative or else like people within the church just kind of condemning Hollywood for, you know, Hollywood doesn't represent us. Hollywood is just not only that, like they're actively against us. And, if you,
Yeah.
unless you're, you know, subscribing to the Christian streaming platform, like you'll never stumble across anything edifying out there in like the wasteland of Hollywood. And, um, so that's sort of what he's pushing back against in the article. Um, and I think there's some interesting stuff in the article. We'll link the whole thing, so you guys can check it out. I think it might be behind a paywall, but for those of you that subscribe, or we'll link it and see if you guys can find a way to read that. But I like the article, one because I just think it's an interesting conversation about kind of conservative art and movies and the industry and Hollywood and stuff. But kind of the main thing, which I wanted us to, we'll shift to after, is I feel like the same question approach and like his template, I feel like can be applied to Christian. Like again, like conservative and Christian, there's overlap, not necessarily always the same thing. And I think there is a place to ask, like, what is a Christian movie? Like, what is we sort of know we want them. It seems we think Hollywood doesn't make them. We talk about Christian movie industry on the rise, but like, what does it actually mean? Like, what does it mean to be a Christian movie? And so, a couple kind of quotes from here. I don't know if there's anything from before we get into some of these quotes and start unpacking it. Like anything that stood out to you in the article?
I mean, I really liked the article. He kinda defined what, is different between a conservative and a reactionary, and they also approached and this is part of that approach. I liked the way he approached it by not defining what conservatism? What do whatever word we're using for it, what it is, but by defining kind of what it's not. And by doing that, you kinda define what it is, and I think that that's the only way that we can really try and define what Christian movies are as well. Yes, I have more to say, but go into the quotes. I think I'm gonna jump the gun a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like, and we can get into it. I feel like he does define what it is, what a conservative is. He just sort of starts. He sort of I think what does he say? He kind of clears the weeds out first of some of the
Yeah, which
misunderstandings.
you
Then he's like,
have to
and then he's
do.
like, this is what.
Yeah.
But yeah, so because he starts, he says, asks the way that a lot of people approach cinema and movies and stuff for conservatives is ask cinema to do the work of a campaign ad to win an argument and move a vote. Flattens the hundreds of technical and expressive decisions to make a film into a single ideological verdict. Just this idea that like a lot of our approach to like this is conservative it is a very like reductionist, simplistic approach of like really we're sort of wanting like a political PR campaign when movies by definition are like much more complex and there's
Mhm.
different facets and stuff.
And that makes it
Um,
more interesting too.
yeah,
By not doing that, it makes it way more interesting and
um,
relatable.
and I think one of his big takeaways in the article is just that we're too limited in how we define these. That as soon as you start
Mhm.
trying to like limit it down to like, well, it is this as long as it fits this very narrow, like agenda driven, then we just miss out on a lot of really thoughtful works of art. Because he says one quote that I liked a lot says, "A conservative worth defending is confident enough to grapple with the ideas that challenge it." And I think there's definitely application for Christian films with that too. Um, that sometimes like
Yeah.
films that just because it's a bit more messy and like there's tension with how it deals with those themes doesn't mean it's not conservative or not Christian. It just means that it's wrestling with these themes. Uh, Another great quote, he says, the best art operates upstream from that, meaning sort of that reductionist approach, shaping the heart before reason governs the mind. Um, which, I mean, me and my brother wrote a whole book kind of on how everything's downstream of the heart, and that Christians should aim kind of towards the heart. A couple other quick quotes to sort of set the stage. He says, kind of after he pushes back against some of the like reactionary stuff of like
Mhm.
conservative is anything that's not woke. Like
Mhm.
very much like, we don't really know what we are. We just know we're not that. We're not what Hollywood's making, and anything else is therefore us. He kind of pushes back against that a little bit and says the better measure is not whether a film is conservative, but whether it speaks to the preoccupations at the heart of the conservative imagination. Does it begin with a tragic view of human nature, understanding that darkness is interior as well as circumstantial? Does it treat inherited goods, family, order, faith, and the transmission of civilization across generations with the gravity that they deserve? Understanding that liberty depends on them. Does it stir gratitude for the permanent things? These are questions worth asking. He says films that engage these concerns most fully might fairly be called conservative. The label is best worn like Don Johnson's white blazer, not a straitjacket. And here's sort of the crux of his conclusions, is what I'm ultimately offering here is a lens, an invitation to engage with films across genres, decades, and political sensibilities, including ones being made right now that have much more to say to us than we have allowed ourselves to believe. And then this is like the final paragraph in the article. It says, the only admission ticket required. Ask whether a film makes you feel that truth, goodness, and beauty are worth defending, not just whether it would vote the way you do. Better questions make for better criticism. They make for better conservatism. And if enough people on the right start asking them, we might just make better art. Uh, which I feel like is just a great summary of sort of his approach
Well,
of,
and I love that last sentence in the article or in that quote, and if enough people on the right start asking them, we might just make better art. I think that we've talked about this before, but that's a lot of the issue in like Christian art or in art made by Christians specifically, is that we're not asking any questions. It's just like, oh, how can I adapt um this testimony or this one scripture to make the most evangelistic like message that I can in this movie. And it's like it's it would be so much more poignant and impactful if we were asking like real life difficult questions and wrestling with them in our art.
yeah, and I think just and some of it's maybe understandable. And this is maybe shifting towards more the question of like what is a Christian movie.
Mhm.
But I feel like because of sort of a Christian background of preaching and theological doctrine, and I feel like our the tendency for years has been to treat art as a sort of intellectual sermon, and it's
Mhm.
it's Christian. We can agree with affirm it as long as it kind of perfectly aligns with our beliefs. Like, this is a Christian movie because all the good guys are Christians. The people that made it are Christians, and it's evangelical, like it's evangelistic. It's um therefore the whole package is a Christian thing. Where I like what the approach I think he takes to conservative movies, I think is a way more helpful one for Christians to take to just beyond that at Christian movies
Mhm.
of more less trying to like define a work of art like in a very small box of like this film, yes, no, Christian, not Christian, conservative, not Christian, or not conservative. Where he's more like, no, like, the better questions are just like, what is this making you feel? Like, what does this make you? How does this sort of stir your heart towards truth and goodness and beauty and like some of these sort of governing themes that are like at the heart of conservatism or like at the heart of Christianity? Like, you know, whether whether the creator agrees with you on every possible belief or whether the movie even does, like focus more on some of those I guess, wider external themes and kind of core tenets, and kind of how those resonate with you, as opposed to sort of the very, hey, we got to slap a label of whether this is, and I think kind of like his takeaway, which I think is right, is just I think there are a lot more films that are doing this for conservatives and for Christians than we allow to fit into like you know,
Yeah.
our very narrow, our very narrow box. Um, but maybe to shift a little bit from that to just I don't know. When I read the article, I was interested just because I am a conservative. I think the what he's talking about in the article is interesting. But I kept wondering, like, can we define a Christian movie like in the same way that he's saying people can't always define like a conservative movie because
Mhm.
it's messy? Can we actually define? Like, I think there are some that we, like, is God's Not Dead a Christian movie? You probably got to include that. Like, is The Chosen? I know it's not a movie, but like a show, entertainment. Like, yeah, like the David animated thing. There are obviously some that are
That
like
are
whatever
obvious.
your definition is, it's probably going to include.
Yeah.
If Jesus is like a central character, then it's probably going to be.
And what's the difference between, like, a religious and a Christian movie? And is it like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle's not a square with some of the with some of these definitions as well? Like a Christian movie is a religious movie, but a religious movie is not necessarily a Christian movie. Like, what's that difference there? I think that's an important distinction,
Yeah, and
to make as
I think
well.
that's where things get tripped up. Because yeah, it does seem like I mean, there's a new. You did an interview. The interview's not out yet. We're doing another interview with, hopefully, with some of the Duck Dynasty people who are supporting it. I don't know how you say it. Ekel,
Eckle. EKKL.
EKKL. It's like a
Eckle.
new streaming media platform, Christian one that's about to launch, I think, later this year. And they're just now rolling stuff out. With they
Yeah.
got the Duck
I
Dynasty.
still don't even know if it's, like, a streaming platform or a distributing company or both. I think it might be both. There's not a lot of information out about it yet.
Yeah, so yeah, the specifics we're still a little on the fence with. But it seems like it's another one in like the growing wave of, like the Wonder Project or all these sort of things that PureFlix or Great American PureFlix now, like they merged. And just this idea that like there is sort of all these kind of like Christian hubs for media. But like what does it mean? Like what gets included then? If, now that we have these platforms, and I think you sort of see different like to me something like PureFlix, Great American PureFlix is closer to something like Christian radio of like I think maybe it is a bit broader, but it's very much like religiously Christian material. Like, it's very
Mhm.
like Bible focused, very upfront. The characters are like Christian people. I think the Wonder Project tries to be a bit. I think they're trying to be more inclusive. Like, it's like, well, it's not just Christian art or movies. It's like
Mhm.
Christian interest, I guess. Like it's
Well, they have, like,
wholesome.
Rudy and the Dead Poet
Yeah,
Society, so they have a lot of, classic films as well.
yeah, it's sort of like, hey, I think they're trying to do, I think what, Sopo in the article, Conservative is getting at of, no, like, just because it doesn't necessarily have, like, a Christian conversion at the end, doesn't mean that it's, like, not validating, like,
Mhm.
kind of core Christian worldview, but it just gets messy because like, I know, and it seems like I still see this, now and then, like, you have things like especially with music, it seems to be, where it's the most explicit of where, like, the whole, like, we're a Christian band, but, like, we don't like Christian music, which, like, I've always just thought was the dumbest thing ever, like
Maybe we don't play religious music, maybe
yeah,
say
and I think
that.
that's what they mean, like, that's the
Yeah.
but I think the fact that they have to sort of clarify, like, "Well, we're Christians, but, like, the music's not Christian," and it's like, we sing
'Cause it
it's
automatically, like, decreases the potential fan base in their heads, I think,
yeah, like, I know
which is
why they're
sad.
trying to say, essentially, they're trying to say, "But we're, like, we're
We're
cooler than
cool.
that." Like, we don't just sing worship song, we sing about, life and other things, and, like,
Uh-huh.
I get like, I don't necessarily even blame them. I think just some of this lack of understanding of, like, what is a Christian art
Mhm.
leads to things like dumb statements of like, "Well, we're Christian, but we're Christians in a band, but we're not a Christian band," and like all these sort of things. Because I think there is this sort of this conflation of we've sort of come to define a Christian movie as what I would call like a religious movie. Like
Mhm.
if you're singing or you're making a movie and it's like about the Bible, or if you're singing it, if you're making music and you're singing, and it's like you could sing it in church on Sunday, then like, and it's like all a praise song, like that's Christian. But if it's, just like a rom-com and they're not necessarily even Christian characters, or like you're making music and it's just on life and, enjoying traveling to LA or something, like it's like, well, is that Christian? Like, is that, you're not thanking God for the safe travel. Like, is it, I guess that's like a Christian making secular music, or that's like that's not a Christian movie. And I think because we sort of have defined it as religious, like there sort of are these kind of the way that Sopo in the article is like saying, like, we define conservative movies by like, well, as long as it like, is sort of this like almost political affirmation of like supports, lecture on, these beliefs. I feel like that's for so long how we've defined a Christian movie is
Mhm.
this is sort of something that makes a very clear sort of case for our faith, and it's very upfront, and it's um you know and I don't know, I think I've always thought that was a bad way to define it, like a way too limiting way um to define it. Like I know why we do it. It's like a marketing tool. Like it's a way to, the Christian genre is just a way to kind of gather it all in one place so that it's easy to sell people. It's easy to find it if you want to find that. It's easy to navigate. But I don't think it's consistent with like, I don't know, how Christians should approach like what it means to really be like a Christian movie. But what are some of your kind of initial thoughts for
Well, and I think it bleeds over into how you see life and how you interact with people who aren't Christian. Like, in my mind, at least, I feel like a lot of people who only watch what they would call Christian movies, but I think are like religious movies, just are way more bitter towards the world and towards people who maybe aren't believers, and that can be so harmful too, in their like faith journey, both in the um person who watches only the religious stuff and in the people that they're interacting with. It can be very negative, and so I think it's really valuable um to engage and to see the difference between religious and Christian art, and to see the value in each of them as well. You have a really good quote in here too that I think sums it up really well. Did you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
is this
The
my
Tolkien
boy?
one.
I mean, Tolkien's
Just
got some banger quotes.
John,
Tolkien.
I think his name's
Uh,
John Ronald Rowell,
oh,
I think.
I think even more highly of you now that you knew the initials for Tolkien, because I'm definitely a
I'm
Tolkien guy.
really good with the names, I will say. That's one of my
Yeah,
gifts.
I can read this quote because to me, this quote has been one that I come back to all the time, um, because I think this is sort of the lens through which I approach this question, which is that I don't believe there's such thing as a Christian movie. Like I think there's religious movies, I think there's non-religious movies. I don't think there's such thing. Now I can maybe explain that in a second, but so here's where Mr. J.R.R. Tolkien, where he was talking about this. He says, "We have come from God, and inevitably the myths woven by us, though they contain error, will also reflect a splintered fragment of the true light, the eternal truth that is with God. Indeed, only by myth making, only by becoming sub creator and inventing stories, can man aspire to the state of perfection that we knew before the fall. Our myths may be misguided, but they steer, however shakily, towards the true harbor, while materialistic progress leads only to the yawning abyss and the iron crown of the power of evil." Um, that's a banger quote. That is a wonderful quote.
Snaps for Tolkien.
Yeah, that's a that's a mic drop quote for Tolkien. And I think to me, and that's one of the reasons I love Tolkien so much, not just because Lord of the Rings is, I love those stories, but I just feel like his whole philosophy of thinking about creation, and like the role of that from a theological perspective just so resonates with me, and I feel like it's such a view that's just been lost over the years. Um, where essentially what he's saying is like, hey, we're all made in the image of God. We're all, the way I sometimes put it is like, hey, we can build sandcastles. Some of them can glorify God, some of them won't, but like God made like the sand box. Like we're in God's creation. All the stuff we're dealing with, people, nature, all the tools that we tell stories with are all created by God. Like we're in the image of God. It it's unavoidable that these creations are going to point towards God in some way. Some of them clearly, some of them not clearly, some of them maybe clearly because they are like rejecting those things, and that makes you just by the tension, like the absence of God, like whatever, like however it works out, like everything's sort of pointed. And like, yeah, like the stories we tell, like we're imperfect. So they're gonna be, like he says, our myths may become misguided, or like however, or I love the splintered fragment is
Mhm.
the
Yeah, I like that a
the words I
lot.
like of like, yeah, like we capture glimpses of faith and of the real truth and goodness and
Mhm.
beauty. It's never gonna be the perfect, this side of heaven. We'll never fully grasp it, but we do capture sort of these glimpses that at least sort of point us and like move us slowly down that path.
This has
To, to,
always been my, like, philosophy too when writing, when creating films, when doing whatever. I was never, of course, it's Tolkien, never been able to put that into words as well as he is. So it's just really encouraging to just to hear it put that way in such an he put it in such an artistic
yeah,
way.
yeah, and I think like I would think like obviously Christians should be the best at doing that because we've experienced more fully the true light. I think non-Christians, people that don't believe, even people that are antagonistic towards the faith, can still do that. Like I think their movies, their art, is, whether they want to or not, or try to
Yeah,
repress it, like it's
100%.
there's gonna be reflections. Like I do think like Christian, like you should expect to find it more honestly and more clearly in Christians creators. You would hope
Yeah.
because of that. But I think kind of his Tolkien's sort of view is why I think like I've always sort of rejected the idea of like Christian art, because I just don't think it exists. Like I don't think as like a very in the sense of like a yes no that is Christian art, that's not. Here's sort of the five things that you got to check the boxes to be, and it's if it doesn't have all five, then it's not Christian. Sort of the Christian in a band, not a Christian band. Like, that whole kind of conversation. I think the reason that we have those sort of silly conversations is because it was just never meant to be categorized that way. Like I
Mhm.
think the more helpful distinction for me is like the one we've been talking about. Like I think there is religious art. Like there is, I think most of the songs that are like written for church worship or like on Christian radio or a lot of like the Renaissance paintings or some of that. Like clearly there's like art with religious purpose or religious theme. Like The Chosen, I would say, is religious art. Like it's telling the Bible story. It's kind of has a very religious purpose. Like I think there is that distinction. To me, though, like the Christian, like this is Christian art. I think as soon as we start trying to sort of define it, I just think we've sort of missed the purpose. I think I see it more the way Tolkien did of like, I think the better way to approach it is not to try and like make sure everything fits into one of these two boxes of Christian art, not Christian art, but like, I think just to approach every work of art, whether it's movie or music or a book, and like say, to view it as like art that glorifies God, that like testifies to to God, and like
Mhm.
art that doesn't. Like,
Mhm.
you know, uh, and like I think some of that can be on a scale. This powerful and like really testifies to God's goodness and I think glorifies God. This art really doesn't, although there's some moments in there that I think you kind of see that, like the splintered fragment is maybe dim, but like you can still see that in that movie. And I think I kind of the guidelines I've always used is just the good, the true, and the beautiful. Like like art that elevates the goodness, beauty and truth in the world of in relation to God. I think that glorifies God. That's art that I think Christians can really affirm and support, and then there's art that doesn't. Art that
Mhm.
maybe rejects those concepts, and I think that doesn't glorify God. But to me, that's a more it's a less, like, quantifiable, like, "But is it Christian? Is this movie Christian?" Like, for me, I think I'm perfectly at home with not having answers to those questions, if
Yeah,
that makes
me too.
watching a movie and being like, "Hey, this" kinda like, in the article the conservative article, like, at the end, like, does that sort of stir your heart towards the goodness like, I'm okay with, like, "Hey, I saw this movie and it stirred some of these things within me that I think really resonate with my soul because they reflect God." I don't know if the movie's Christian, Christian in quotes, like, I don't know if it's in that sense, but I think that's what makes art powerful, is that is that it doesn't need to be in a box, like, we can approach it and just sort of find that truth rather than the categories, but, what do you think? Is that does that resonate with you, or do you like your categories and your boxes
I
and
hate categories, especially I don't hate categories, but, like, people sometimes will and no hate at all, but people sometimes ask me, "Oh, what, like, genre, do you what genre of movies do you like to make, or do you like the best?" Or, like, we did a music video recently, and I was like, "Oh, what genre of music is it?" And my brain every time just goes blank because I'm like it's hard, like, even with even not looking at whether something is Christian or religious or not, it's hard to define a work of art at all. So what genre it is, there's some rom-coms that are like, clearly this is a rom-com, but many times you just can't categorize it like that because that's just the nature of art. So that is frustrating a little bit, and it just kind of is confusing too when you really
Yeah,
sit and think about it.
and I think that's part of why so many, like, what people would call Christian art has been bad, is, like, I feel like a lot of people, like, especially with, like, films, at least, like, a decade ago, like, the goal was to make a Christian movie. Like, it wasn't to make a work of goodness, truth, and beauty. It was making a Christian movie, and so we gotta have these elements in it to satisfy the requirements of a Christian like, the focus wasn't on how do we, like, elevate goodness, truth, and beauty in this art and, like,
Mhm.
help people to, like, resonate with that and point them towards the source of the true source of goodness and truth and beauty, like, it was very much like, "Well, this is a Christian movie, so it means we gotta have a Christian character, we gotta have, a little gospel spiel to convert audiences who aren't Christian if they go see this movie, and we gotta the characters gotta the atheists gotta be bad because they're the other, they're the enemy, they're not the Christians. The Christians gotta be good, Christians gotta win. There's all these requirements of like we're trying to make Christian art. And I mean that's even my and maybe I get too cynical with it, but like why I struggle with some maybe more the like CCM type, but like Christian music is like I feel like this is a song that was just made to make a Christian song.
Well,
It's
all
like
you listen to is heavy metal, so
yeah, and because
that
there's not enough there is, Christians have been well represented within the metal world,
Oh,
and
that's
so
good.
some of our best artists are in fact are making heavy metal music, um, but just sort of the idea that for me, a lot of the Christian songs, it's like, are we just like, you know, like putting a bunch of Christian jargon on like a dartboard and like throwing a dart and like, okay, we're gonna use
Yeah.
that word, we're gonna use this word, we're gonna use this Greek concept, like
Mhm. Well, that's
it
why
just feels like it's very much like we're making
yeah.
Christian music, so it has to be this thing, as opposed to just like, hey, we're making beautiful music. We're making music that elevates goodness and truth and is
Mhm.
beautiful because it elevates goodness and truth. And I think that's what's been missing with the whole like so in some ways I almost reject the whole question of like what is Christian art? What is a Christian
It
movie?
was your idea to talk
Uh
about it too.
um And I mean, I get like the conversation's important because that is the
Yeah.
language people use. Um, but I just feel like if the answer is there isn't such a thing, and
Mhm.
we shouldn't try and define it as that. Like that we're on the wrong path from step one if that's sort of the approach. At least
And
that's
that's why I
my
think
view.
that's why first of all, that's why I'm excited that you're letting me do monthly music recommendations. But also that's why I think that just the collision in general is so important because I think out of all of the or out of most of the, Christian media outlets or whatever you wanna call it, don't really have the mindset that this article has, and I think that that is I think that's very important for people to adopt or adapt in their own way of thinking about life and art as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like it even like because you can see, and then we can move on. But like even like some of the criticism I know I've got over the years of like people have said like I'm critical of like Christian so-called Christian movies, but then I'm like affirming stuff in like a secular movie, and it's like,
Mhm.
what side are you on? Like, you trade like, this
You
idea that
traitor.
like this idea that like Christians should just be a cheerleader for anything that's like Christian and shouldn't even talk about stuff that isn't, let alone affirm goodness in it. And I think some of it is that misunderstanding of like, I'm not really going into like I'm not evaluating movies and art based on how closely I think they like align with the category of like I'm looking for things that are good, true, and beautiful. And like if I
Mhm.
find those in a Christian, a faith-based thing, then I've very much supported a lot of those movies. But if I don't, then I'm not going to support it just because it has the label Christian or because it's on a Christian streaming platform or, if it's a secular movie or, whatever, like there's a mainstream Hollywood movie. Like if I think there's beauty in it and goodness, like I think Christians should, kind of like Paul, like, everything that's pure and beautiful and true and good and
Mhm.
admirable, like, fix your mind on those things. Like, I think Christians should be able to like affirm those things wherever they find them, recognizing that at all point, like Tolkien would say, like it all is reflecting God. Um, so I don't know. I think that is, I think it is, and I think it has shifted. Like, I think there is, like, I don't think we're the only ones on some island that are like, I think there is being uh, some change in the guard to see things more broadly. I think because those categories of just strictly Christian. I mean, for some people, that's exactly what they want. Like they want the stereotypical Christian movie, and that's fine if that's what you want to watch. But it does seem like more and more people are being open to the fact that what we really want is art that's beautiful, true, and good, not
Mhm.
just art where Christians are heroes and atheists are bad and they
And
preach the gospel at
drunken.
the end and we can go see it, with
Yeah.
with our church. And I will give a shout out to you. You already mentioned it, but we just had a guest article which was published on our website, thecollision.org. We'll link it below. It's an article about, I forget what the exact title is, but why we need Wake Up Dead Man more than God's Not Dead. And in some ways, I think what Sabrina, who wrote the article,
I
is
think
getting
it's
at,
Sabina.
what
Yeah.
Sabina was getting at, I think is exactly what we've been talking. I think she is l- living out what we've been talking about as far
Mhm.
as like we're looking for goodness and truth and beauty. We're not just looking for Christian art, so called. But something that I know we are always looking for. I know you in particular mark it on your calendar sometimes a week in advance.
Always,
Is
yeah.
is what will be shared, whether it will be true, good, and beautiful, or merely just Christian, is the final segment of this podcast. We have things we like that you should like too. So this is my week to share something, and I'll be honest, I didn't really realize it was my week until right before we recorded, and I've been sick and running around, so I didn't necessarily have a whole lot of things that were bubbling up. But I did thought I would share a book because I like books. This is a book that's I guess my screen's flipped, but How Beauty Will Save the World: Recovering the Power of the Arts for the Christian Life. And the author of this book is Winfield Bevins. And it's a really good book. This is a book that I was sent. Someone that knows that I devour these types of books on beauty and the arts um, thought I would like it, and they mailed it to me. And Randall did that, and I appreciated. I read it actually. Like I read the entire thing on a car ride to when I was going down to the beach last week. When me and my wife would switch off driving now and then, I would pick up this book and I devoured it before I even got to the beach. And in some ways, I think his point in the book very much affirms, I think, what we were talking about, that one, that we need the power of just beauty and goodness and stuff, but also the author of this, who seems like a really interesting guy and has sort of some arts groups, is very optimistic about the fact that there is sort of this growing movement of Christian creatives and artists that are making things of beauty and are kind of approaching it the right way. And I think it's a good intro. Like, some of these books are hard. Like, I've read so many books like this. Like, I mean, I did my PhD in the topic, so I'm pretty sure like every everything he quotes in this book, like every other book or author, I've read that entire book. So there wasn't necessarily a whole lot like just purely new for me. Although I always appreciate just seeing how other people approach the issue. But I do think if you haven't necessarily read a lot on like the arts or on beauty from a Christian perspective, this is a really good just like intro level, get you, yeah, up to speed on some of that. So we'll maybe we'll link like the Amazon. Encourage you guys to go check out that book because beauty is important, and we need Christians making works of beauty. But also, health is important, and I hopefully will continue to get healthier as the weeks go on, as we get back into the groove of culture and the collision. We will definitely be back next week for what's all happening. Again, always a lot happening in culture. I know this week, Hoppers, you can check out. I have my review out already for the new kind of Pixar movie, and I wasn't crazy about it. I didn't hate it. I just didn't think it was all that good. But could you guys go check out my full review for that? But more than that, we hope you will check out our podcast again next week, every Thursday, for more conversations on faith and pop culture.